Welcome to memoQtalks, where we talk to industry leaders about their experiences, lessons learned, and what works best across all areas of localization. Now here's your host.
Hey, Konstantin, how are you, man?
Hi, Mark. I'm good. How are you?
Pretty good. I'm just getting started here. It's about 6 a.m. for me. I'm just getting up to milk the cows,
Did you hear the cock? Is it crow or caw?
The rooster crows. Yeah. I think I'm up before the roosters around here, but that's what you get when you work for a European company. Got to get up early because I'm on the West Coast. Hey, congratulations on the success of your recent event. I think that was a 2-day event, and you had a very large and engaging turnout.
Indeed, it was smaller than last time. We had only about 600 people in the room on day one, but the numbers in the follow-up on YouTube already are exceeding 1,500. So we're going to get to a few thousand people watching that. I guess many people are interested in the impact of the large language models.
Yeah, so what were some of the key takeaways?
Well, the key takeaway is that the localization people have responded to the boom around large language models. People are not sitting idle. The translation management systems, the translation tools are integrating OpenAI in multiple use cases. We've seen rephrasing, translation, blended translation with MT, the ability to write your prompt to change the output of how you translate to adjust for a certain audience, shortening of translations, more concise rewriting. So gender change, if it's a man or a woman that we're talking about. So the tools are moving really strongly into this. Then the buy side already had a few pilots. There was a pilot for translation. There was a pilot for language quality assurance. Canva could do 10 times more LQA for the same budget with the automation from a large language model. And there were other pilots for generating multilingual content. So people are moving. It's not the majority yet. It's the early adopters. But the strength of this move and the different multiple use cases show that the grassroots are going to the ground really, really fast. So we're not behind the curve. The localization people are jumping in and they're making use of this wave of technology.
So I kind of feel like this is very similar to the time when we had the .com explosion and everybody was running around and knew that this was a big thing and were super excited about it, but weren't exactly sure how this big thing was going to end up or what form was it ultimately going to take. There were so many different attempts that failed, some succeeded, but there was just this massive surge of energy and investment. What is your sense in terms of ChatGPT in particular? How is that a game changer in our industry compared to regular old just MT?
Yes. Well, first of all, to differentiate between today's boom and .com bust, during the .com, anyone saying .com could get a lot of funding. And if you look at the
AI.
Yes, but if you look at funding trends, it's falling across the board. Investors are not deploying their capital. So it's not leading to inflated valuations at all.
That could be because there's a war in Europe and there's a recession in the US. Okay. Just a year ago, funding was at an all-time high. Right now, it's at an all-time low. So that's a macro picture. But I'm talking about if you are going to get funding, it doesn't hurt to have AI in your business name.
It doesn't hurt. There is the prioritization for AI, but it's not the gold rush in terms of money being poured into bogus projects.
Right.
This is very lean approaches. This is people doing grassroots. These systems cost very little to use, and we see them deployed in a variety of scenarios. So it's not the same as .com. It's different.
Okay.
These systems are powerful. You can see that computers can talk better than humans can do. They can write, they can translate, they can answer questions, anything you'd like. And it's just falls to some people inside the organization to implement those. And language people compete with every other department or collaborate with every other department that is there to be among the first to implement. Who becomes the
So
GPT expert, right?
maybe what you're saying is because the investment environment is kind of constrained right now, it's forcing companies to, work on a model that actually makes financial success now versus just throwing a bunch of money at something and hoping it comes out later. So, does that make sense?
It's also very easy to implement, right? You get the
Okay.
API and anybody can write the prompt, right? It doesn't
Hmm.
take a lot of training, doesn't take 5 years of university or 9 years for a doctor in some countries like France to start writing prompts. You can do it after 1 hour, 2 hours of preparation. We had this hackathon on Friday. There was like a 30-minute briefing, and then people went off to write the prompts. And many were very, very successful. They optimized, they changed parameters, temperature, tokens, cutoff, etc., and it worked for them, right? So it's an easy thing to do. It democratization of natural language processing was in the hands of engineers before. Now it could be done by a non-NLP professional. It could be done by any subject matter expert. You're a specialist in the life sciences field. You add prompt engineering, presto, you have stuff being done in minutes that used to take months or weeks before to deploy, or even years.
I'm seeing a similar trend in data sciences where you historically needed to be a data scientist to actually go in and run SQL queries and understand the whole process, et cetera. And there's a movement for the democratization of data science and basically simple language queries, but not even just bringing you the results, but then figuring out what's the best way to display the results based upon what you've asked in the past. So is it a pie chart? Is it a bar chart? What is it? And that's pretty darn cool. Back to the second part of the question, though. So is that the main differentiator between ChatGPT and then historical MT, the application of it in localization, is the fact that you can ask for these additional prompts?
No, the few um, points of difference. Easy customization is one of them. You just if you don't like something in the translation, you just tell it, "Don't do that. Do something different." You write a
Hmm.
verbal command, and it follows to some extent. Right? That's a big difference. Machine translation is just one of the use cases, right? There's
Okay.
50, 60 different use cases that people can think of within one brainstorming session, right? It's easy to come up with a few ways to implement, easy to test. So proof of concept projects are basically an arm's length away, right? You can easily take one. And people are not looking just at this. They look at, I don't know, glossary with morphology implementation, machine translation quality estimation, rewriting poor quality source so that it comes out without errors and fix the translation memory. So there's a bunch of stuff you can do that were not accessible before or cost too much, and now you can do it on a very small budget.
What if you were the CEO of a mid-size LSP, let's say, 10 to $20 million a year in revenue, and you have customers across the board. So let's stay out of the specialties for a second. What would you do immediately in terms of applying ChatGPT in these large language models?
Well, the LSPs need to act immediately because the customers are acting. And if the vendor side wants to stay in the business, they need to be one step ahead of the customers. They need better prompts. They need better prompt writing services. They need human in the loop workflows where prompt engineering and prompting and model output can be combined with a review by a professional linguist, either a spot check or a detailed 100% review, right? So build an internal muscle to be one step ahead of the customer. That's the first and the foremost recommendation. If they don't do that, they'll be probably displaced by internal departments on the customer side using no human in the loop workflows.
Can you give a very specific use case that, this is like a no-brainer, LSP should adopt this?
They should go for translation. They should go for translation memory fixing, sort rewriting in multiple ways for orthography, punctuation, correctness, target audience rewriting, SEO, keyword injection, inclusive
That's
language.
more than one use case, Konstantin. So let's sort of how would ChatGPT or a similar tool be used to help with the TM improvement? I forget the exact word you used, but it was something like improving the quality of the
One of the best
TM
things
enhancement or something.
that it does, the language model, not necessarily ChatGPT. You have others now. You have Hugging Face Chat. You have Cohere. You have the European models, OpenGPTX, NLP Cloud, etc. Right. So there's a bunch of these models, and they're coming up like mushrooms after the rain. The best thing it can do is it's a rewrite, right? Rewrite a text, and it can do it really well with detailed instructions. The smaller the rewrite is, the easier it is to make it predictable, so it does not introduce hallucinations. We like the way it writes. We don't like that it hallucinates, that it injects something that is not true. Right. So any kind of rewrite, whether it's just to fix the spelling errors or to change the tone of voice or to refresh the terminology, is a no brainer. It's where you could start.
Yeah, but I mean, some of these TMs are huge. They're enormous, right? So
Yeah.
you say, hey, ChatGPT, you got nothing going on right now. Can you go ahead and rewrite all the segments in that TM? But those segments were created by professional human translators, typically, right?
Yep.
So if you're going to ask ChatGPT or another tool to go in and rewrite that, something that's already been done by a human translator that you typically trust and pay good money to do that translation, now don't you have to go back through and check everything manually?
Well, you know that there are deadline pressures, and the humans are human. They make mistakes. Even the best translator is prone to making some mistakes, maybe 1 per 1,000 words, maybe 2 per 1,000 words. You can never be sure that your TM does not contain errors. Second, the TMs get outdated. And, I've been in this model training business for a few years now. People come in and they say, we have the best quality TM. But then you start doing it and you have ambiguities, missed segments, untranslated segments, terminology which is not applied, spelling errors, lots of stuff, right? So every TM has some problems. It's never 100% clean. So yeah, of course, there is the possibility of hallucination, that it might rewrite it in the wrong way, but you tell it to rewrite just maybe the spelling errors, nothing else. And voila, you already have the fix.
Fair enough. Okay. And from where you sit, are certain languages, are these tools more effective with certain language pairs versus others? And if so, which pairs lend themselves to working with these tools versus what languages are not being served very well at this point?
Well, we only ran a handful of tests so far at scale, with professional review, because it requires expert translators or domain experts reviewing the output. What we saw that the quality with German, Spanish, and French was higher than with, for example, Portuguese, Russian, or the other languages that we tested with. So French, Spanish, and German were the better suited languages for ChatGPT, for that model, the one which is called OpenAI ChatGPT 3.5 Turbo. But as the company and others rolling out more models, of course, more testing will be required. It's just
And is that
to
simply
benchmark for your kind of case, right? If you have translation or fixing, you take a small sample, you run, you evaluate, and then you can move forward or decide to shelve it for now.
great? And is that simply because there's just more data, there's more translations to feed the engine?
Yeah, they all draw from the same well, which is called the Common Crawl project, right? It's an alternative to Google search, crawling the web. It's an open source project where you can draw on terabytes of data, and they all draw from the same. It's Common Crawl, it's Wikipedia, it's open subtitles, this type of open corpora, and then the magical training that they take. So if there is a prevalence of a specific language in a corpora that they've drawn, of course, they have an advantage for these languages. Also consider that some languages, especially tier 3, tier 4, they might not have such a big literature corpus overall, right? So English is humongous, French, Chinese, Russian, giant languages with lots of literature in original or translated. But take maybe Lithuanian, you probably have fewer books in that or fewer websites.
Yeah, I recently spoke with Dr. Martin Benjamin, and he does a lot of work with Swahili and other African languages that are underserved. And one of his concerns is there's an increasing technological divide between the haves and the have-nots because you, there's a very small amount of content is translated into those languages, and so the people in those countries and those cultures have limited access to the same training materials, specifically in the technology sector. And then you have organizations like Clear Global, Translators Without Borders, who do similar work in terms of getting information out there during the pandemic. Obviously, in those European languages that you mentioned, there was a lot of information flowing back and forth. But for some of the other languages, especially some of these smaller African languages, well, Swahili is still like 100 million people, so it's not that small of a community. But it was there wasn't as much information going into those languages. So organizations like Clear Global would spend a lot of time and effort to get the information out there. Are you seeing any organizations apply these ChatGPT or other tools to kind of pick up that work and accelerate it?
Well, you could create synthetic data. So which means you give it 10 sentences and you say, ChatGPT, here is 10 sentences in Swahili, make it 10,000 sentences of a similar type. And it will produce some output, which you then may use to train another language model. For example, you want, I don't know, summarization or named entities detection or translation, whatever you'd like. Now, synthetic data is useful. For instance, you probably saw that Translated rolled out more than 140 languages last week, right? They benefited, for example, from using synthetic data. I don't know how they generated it, but they did use some synthetic data to add this enormous number of languages, right? They used to run with 55, now they run with 200, right? So there is some use. In the past, governments in regions that wanted to protect their language, they invested, they created centers and projects for national corpora. That happened in Kazakhstan, that happened in Korea, where Flita was running a government project to create a Korean corpus. I know that, for example, for Gaelic language, there was several initiatives, Breton, which was disappearing, and then forces in Brittany came together to really make Breton more available. Imagine it's a big divide whether your language is going to be a part of big tech machine translation pool or not. If Breton is a part of Google Translate, Microsoft Translate, ChatGPT, DeepL, right? Many people can translate, and it ensures the survivability of your language. So you kind of manufacture corpora on a national level, you open source it, and people can train models with that, right? So there is something that the governments can do. If your language is not a part of these big models looking forward, then as the number of speakers dwindles, so how do you protect it? How do you make sure it does not disappear? It's super important for every language that has resources and enthusiasts to create this corpora and to give it away in order for it to become a part of the technology products that everyone are using.
That's awesome. And it does sound like ultimately that these tools could come in, if used in the right way by the right people, to help some of these underserved languages. I want to ask you or talk a little bit about what Custom.MT does. But before that, let me just ask you, what's the most mind-blowing thing you've seen one of these tools do so far?
Well, I'm a writer, right? So I offer content. And I've been doing it all my life. I've been writing, trying to make my writing better, adopting business writing guidelines and so on. Every week, I write something on LinkedIn to make sure my audience stays abreast of the latest technology developments and exciting things happening in the industry. And one of the most mind-blowing things for me was to discover that after so many years of practice in writing, my writing is still inferior, right? It still does a better job. I've been doing it all my life. I put myself in one of the top percentiles on writing specific text, and still the AI can do it better. So for me, it was a special moment. I'm not a
That's
AI engineer by education. It's something I am growing into as the years go by. I've never before been a company founder, but I've been writing all my life, and
yeah.
it can do it better.
That's humbling. And at the same time, I mean, there's, the companies like Google and other organizations out there that collect so much data about what we do, say, write, and they can create these personality maps or profiles to emulate you, for example. And it'll be interesting because I don't think we're very far away from, that the machine being able to take all of the content that you've ever written and then write something with your style. And then you can say, improve it by 10%. So I mean, we're pretty much there, right? I've played around with the tool where I had it write an email to my wife asking her for permission to buy a Porsche. And it just wrote this beautiful letter with great logic, but being very sweet. And then I said, put it into Shakespearean English, and it did it. It's just amazing. You can do that kind of stuff on the fly. And I think there's about 8 billion people on this planet who still don't understand where this is all going to end up, right? I mean, how does this affect a kid at school when the teacher says, "I want you to write a report on, the factors that caused the Boston Tea Party, for example," and they're like, "Well, I could go to the library and read a bunch of books, but maybe I'll just ask ChatGPT." That's kind of scary and interesting all at once. So let's talk about Custom.MT. Tell me, what do you guys do, man?
Before I do, where is your Porsche?
ChatGPT wasn't that good. I need to wait for the next version. My wife said, wait for the next version of ChatGPT and you might get one. So yeah.
Or just change send the letter to Porsche.com or the company and say, this is a beautiful letter. Now give me the Porsche.
Yeah, or I could just say, ChatGPT, take out the word Porsche and put in very cheap bicycle. And my wife would say yes. Okay, so
I think we're mispronounced it, right? It's Porsche or something like this.
Porsche. I don't know.
I think so.
I don't know. Ask ChatGPT.
What's
the Yeah. So
imagine ChatGPT plus Alexa, and you say Alexa. And
I ask Siri all the time. I'm so lazy. I'll be like, "Hey Siri, how many trees are on the planet?" She's like, "There are 2 trillion trees," and I'm like, "Whoa." So because I really needed to know, how many trees. So hey, Custom.MT, what do you guys do, man?
we're an engineering company. So when we started about 3 years ago, maybe a little less, well, I was asking myself, what's the hottest thing in localization right now? And the hottest thing, the most magnetic at that point, was training custom machine translation engines and domain adaptation. So we went there and we started with building up services to implement this kind of machine translation program. Let's say you already have a TMS like memoQ, and then you like to have more efficiency there, custom tailored MT so that it has the best engine for every domain or every language. And so we went into this, we built a pipeline with engineers, with tools and so on. Now we've built some software which does it automatically. And the next thing is we're going to follow the needs of our audience, the localization people, into the next wave of technology. It's going to be custom GPT.
Cool. So walk me through a typical engagement.
Well, in machine translation or GPT, in machine translation, it's very easy, right? You have TMS. The next step is to make your program more efficient. You want to move some of the content types to no human in the loop. You want to maximize the productivity of your translators. You need good machine translation, or the best on the market. We will take the translation memory made by expert translators over the years. We will tailor a machine translation output, benchmark multiple models, and select the best for every language with customization, and implement it in your TMS or through our console, which is the kind of a dashboard where the machine translation head in your team can track performance, change engines, add processing, and so on. So the end result, your machine translation is better than anything on the market. It takes a few months to make it true because, of course, you have to evaluate. You need to know the risks. You want to really go detailed on the type of errors the machine translation engines are doing. You want to structure your data right, and a lot of the work is under the hood. Once done, your team is kind of up to date on how AI projects happen, and you're ready to move on to the next thing, which could be anything, right? Localization people are becoming lang ops people, so you can now combine language in any department of the company, not just documentation or websites. You can go into anything: customer support, legal, HR, video, SEO, whatever you like.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you are working with companies that want to use MT, but maybe they don't have their own in-house experts to get MT up and running in the most effective, efficient manner. So you help to kind of accelerate that process.
That's one way to put it. Imagine if you want to benchmark, I don't know, 60 or 80 models. You have 10
Mhm.
languages, you want to benchmark six per language, right? So that's already 60 models to benchmark, to train and benchmark. And we have that pipeline which does the process semi-automatically and efficiently in a professional way.
Awesome. And so that's for MT. Explain how that would change for the application of ChatGPT
Well,
or
ChatGPT
other tools.
or GPT, large language model, has many more use cases. The moment, the thing that everyone should do with ChatGPT is to run pilots. Try it for translation, try it for quality estimation, for terminology, for inclusive language, for standard technical English, German, everything, right? So we would make it happen, right? We would act as an outsourced team which implements. In every implementation, when language and localization are concerned, uh, there's a few engineering challenges with the file types, with the professional workflows, with test sets, with training sets, validation sets, you name it, right? So we'll take care of this complexity and create a pipeline which combines a prompt, which could be optimized over time. Let's say you write prompt today, translate this. Tomorrow you say, translate this in a specific voice. Then you say, translate it in a specific voice for a 5-year-old. Your prompt changes, but your pipeline stays the same.
Awesome. So, one of the age-old conversations in this scenario is you talk to an organization, they're like, oh, well, we've got our own team that's going to do that. And then you have the outsource organization that says, hey, but we can help you do it in a more cost-effective manner. I'm going to let you put your sales hat on here for a second. In that scenario, what would you say to me if I'm the customer and I'm saying, I've got some guys and they're pretty smart and they know MT. One guy's got a PhD, or one of the ladies has a PhD in computational linguistics, and she's a MT expert, and we think we're going to just build this out internally. What would your kind of counter comments be?
Well, every internal team has limitations. Data sourcing, maybe validation, evaluation. There's always something that they need. Working only internally means they're working siloed. They're strapped for resources. If they have a partner, they have access to more. They can build faster. They can do more. We bring in the expertise from multiple companies. We have software already in place to automate the process. I don't want to spend a lot of time selling my services, but we're focusing on this area, AI in localization, right? So why not?
Yeah. And when I look at the outsource model, you're really bringing in a true subject matter expert. And if I look at an organization or others like yours, you guys are working on so many different use cases every single day. So just by default, you're going to bring more to the table than what an in-house team would have based upon their experience in this limited kind of context. You just mentioned software. What's the software you use? Is this proprietary, and how does it help the process?
For machine translation, we built something called Machine Translation Console, which is our proprietary software. It includes a data cleaning mechanism and the ability to plug in different machine translation engines into your software. The memoQ connector is coming out in a few weeks, and the users of
The what? The what connector?
the memoQ connector is coming out in a few
Thank
weeks.
you. Speak into the microphone.
memoQ. I have a
There we
t-shirts
go.
from memoQ. Maybe I should wear it in the next installment.
Next time.
So,
Yes.
for instance, once we roll out that connector, memoQ users will have GPT 3.5, GPT-4 for translation with the prompting interface, which we already have built. For the GPT part, for this, we have a prompting platform. It is tailored for translation right now. And then we have an external prompting platform for all kinds of use case promptitude that we've partnered with. We're going to explore this space and combine building and partnering up with the best technology in order to make solutions quickly. Speed today is everything.
Yeah. Speed, connectivity are massively important. Any concerns about regulatory issues? I mean, you had a whole country in Europe ban ChatGPT, right? So, and I will see how long that lasts. If it's
They
still
already
even in
revoked
effect.
the ban. If you're
Yeah.
not a child, you could use it.
Yeah. Okay. And then, so any concerns that you're seeing in terms of the regulatory environment or security issues?
Well, the governments are going to fight back. They feel like the technology companies are winning in a game of power, in a game of thrones, and so the governments are going to crack down on the large language models. Imagine the power and the influence they bring, and someone could use it to speak with a million voices on the internet. The next election comes, you already have generated videos for or against the candidate. You have comments generated by, I don't know, I don't want to say ChatGPT, a large language model appearing everywhere, promoting this candidate or that candidate. This needs to be somehow controlled by the government. They want to retain their influence, and so I think they're
Well,
going to crack down.
in the U.S., it's no secret that, I mean, I don't know if you watched the testimony before Congress with Matt Taibbi and talking about the Twitter files. I mean, you had many government agencies going into Twitter and the other social media platforms saying, "Hey, you need to deplatform these people. You need to throttle them down." And then obviously Twitter had cases of, I don't remember the exact number, but thousands and thousands of bots that were out there being used, right, to try to influence people in one direction or the other, right? So it's this amazing chess match that's being played right now.
So every country
Uh,
will want to have their own GPT, and GPTs will
yeah,
fight GPTs in an election. And people will, of course, vote for this side or the other. But the ability to influence millions of people from one small group is super duper important.
yeah, that's pretty crazy stuff. Hey, what should people be looking for in the next few months? Like, what's going to be the next big thing that is going to shake things up?
Well, I wish I knew. Perhaps that will make me rich. And if I knew, why would I tell it?
Why don't we ask
Yes,
ChatGPT?
yes.
Yeah.
Well, the next few months are
Um,
all about pilots and deployment. The models
okay.
are out. They are getting better and better. Fact checking is an area which is feverishly attacked by different AI companies. So I imagine that in the next few months, there'll be many more models, and hallucinations will be combated in some way with references, models fighting models, and understanding of what's the right thing. Basically, GPT security will be a big area of investment, and we'll see a lot of movement there.
Awesome. Hey, you provide consulting services to organizations, but earlier in our conversation, you referenced the kind of change of roles of linguists, right? It, how can a a translator today, how can they prepare themselves for a change in their role because you're still going to have some very strong subject matter experts who are going to do things the traditional way. But for a lot of translators, their role is going to change. What can they do to kind of prepare for that transition?
Well, they should learn prompt engineering and combining the output of a model with their work. Right? The buyers, some of them will move away from human-based services. Others will stay. If they stay, and you can do 3 times, 10 times more work in the same amount of time, potentially you can get rich in the next couple of years. If you write it right, then with your business development skills and maybe a pricing play and the ability to input the system in the mix, you can potentially provide much more without having to hire people and taking care of HR. Just yourself plus the model done right, and you can do lots more work. Change the prices, reduce, increase depending on your customer. You can potentially be rich before the human is phased out of the loop from the loop.
Interesting. Hey, so if any of our listeners want to find out more information about Custom.MT or connect with you or participate in your next event, what's the best way to do that?
Well, we have the website, and you can subscribe to me on LinkedIn. I only have one social network where I'm focusing on, that's LinkedIn. So feel free to follow, drop a comment, send me a line, and we'll see what we can do together.
Awesome. And have you planned your next event? Are you any rough approximate dates?
We had a hackathon, which was pretty successful, very interesting, a bit chaotic as well. It was the first one. I think hackathons are very practical. People do something. They just don't sit there and listen. They actually do things for the 3 hours. So we want to repeat it as soon as possible.
Awesome. Hey, Konstantin, I've really enjoyed this conversation, and hats off to you and your team for the work that you're doing and the events that you're running. It's you're doing a great job of sharing information with the localization community. So thank you so much for that and for being on memoQtalks.
Thank you very much, Mark. Excellent questions. Better questions than anyone that interviewed me.
Better than ChatGPT.
Better than ChatGPT. I commend.
Maybe right before you came on here, I was like, ChatGPT. I just woke up. Give me some good questions to ask Konstantin. Maybe. You have a great rest of your day.
Thank you for joining memoQtalks, where we talked with industry leaders about their experiences and lessons learned to gain new insights about what works best across all areas of localization. Join us next time on memoQtalks.